Under the morning sun, a man wakes up in a hospital, unable to remember his name, his past, or the most important things in his life. All that remains is a vague feeling, a fleeting memory like a passing breeze, that he once loved and had a loyal companion. But where is that friend now? That golden-furred dog? Their story, of friendship that transcends time, of loss and an unyielding search, has only just begun. Dawn breaks over the vast cornfields of rural Nebraska. The soft morning sunlight casts a golden glow over the trees, while the wind carries the rich scent of the earth and the fragrance of the harvest. A young man with a sturdy frame works tirelessly in the fields, his calloused hands covered in dirt. Beside him, a golden-furred dog with bright, faithful eyes runs around, occasionally stopping to lick his master's hand as if offering encouragement. That young man is Ethan. Since childhood, he has lived alone in a worn-down farmhouse with the dog he once found abandoned by the roadside on a stormy day. The dog, whom he named Buddy, became the only family Ethan ever had. When he couldn't afford food, he always shared his last scraps of dry bread with Buddy. On freezing winter nights, when the icy winds howled through the wooden house, Buddy curled up beside him, offering warmth and comfort. Ethan had no parents, or at least, he didn't remember them. Every time he looked into the old mirror in his home, he only saw his own reflection staring back, a lonely figure, as if he had spent too long in the shadows. He grew up with the kindness of the neighbors in the small town, where everyone knew each other. But on those bitterly cold nights, loneliness seeped into every corner of his heart. He often wondered, was there anyone in this world who truly cared for him besides Buddy? Ethan's life, though difficult, carried a certain peace. Each day, he woke up early to tend to the fields, sow seeds, and work tirelessly for a bountiful harvest. Hunger might haunt him at times, but it never took away his faith in tomorrow. Sometimes, as he watched Buddy run joyfully across the fields, his bright eyes full of life, Ethan felt as if he, too, was a part of this world, a piece of the lush green fields and the vast open sky. Ethan cherished the tranquil afternoons when the sun slowly dipped behind the distant mountains, and the two of them wandered together under the crimson hues of the sunset. Buddy would walk ahead, occasionally turning back, as if to make sure Ethan was still there. In those moments, Ethan felt truly alive, even if his life seemed destined never to change. Yet, those small, fleeting moments, Buddy's presence, were the most precious things he had. On long nights, as moonlight cast shadows through the old wooden window, Ethan often sat on the front porch, Buddy curled up at his feet. Those loyal eyes still shone brightly, but perhaps, deep down, they both understood that there was no place to seek comfort but in each other. Ethan would glance at Buddy, sometimes offering a wistful smile, wondering if there was another life beyond these endless fields. The town where Ethan lived was small but close-knit and kind-hearted. The people knew of his struggles. Every morning, they saw him working tirelessly on his land, rain or shine. But Ethan never complained. He lived simply, content with what little he had, and much of that was thanks to Buddy's companionship. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves began to drift from the trees, Ethan stepped outside and called for Buddy. The dog came running instantly, wagging his tail excitedly. Ethan knelt down and patted him gently. "Do you remember that stormy night, Buddy?" he whispered. Buddy looked up at him, eyes full of understanding, as if he could grasp every word. The memory of that rainy night lingered in Ethan's mind, the night he found Buddy alone by the roadside, soaked, shivering, and lost. From that day on, Buddy became Ethan's only companion. They never left each other's side, whether through storms or the harshest winters. To Ethan, Buddy was an invaluable source of comfort. And to Buddy, Ethan was everything. Together, they had endured the hardest moments, shared joy and sorrow, and found solace in the simple moments of life. Then one day, as summer was drawing to an end, a great tragedy struck. That morning, Ethan and Buddy were driving his old truck to the farmer's market, the back filled with baskets of fresh produce. Buddy ran alongside, his long legs moving swiftly, tail wagging excitedly, eyes gleaming as if he would never tire. But suddenly, a large truck came speeding toward them. From a distance, only the blaring, piercing sound of the horn could be heard. Ethan never saw what happened next, just the violent impact before everything turned black. When Ethan awoke, he found himself lying in a hospital bed in a large medical center in Chicago. The cold, white lights overhead blinded him, the sterile smell of antiseptics filling his nostrils. The room was empty except for the steady beeping of machines monitoring his vital signs. His head throbbed as if it might explode. He tried to sit up, but his body was weak, aching in every limb. A nurse approached, her voice gentle yet laced with concern. "You're awake. You were in a serious accident. But you're lucky, you survived." Ethan tried to take a deep breath, but for some reason, his heart pounded, not from pain, but from an overwhelming sense of unfamiliarity. There was a vast emptiness inside him, as if something vital had been lost. Who am I?" The nurse looked at him with sympathy, her eyes filled with worry and quiet sorrow. "We don't know. You had no identification, and no one has come to claim you. A charity organization brought you here for treatment." Ethan felt his world unraveling. A strange and unsettling sensation clouded his thoughts. What was his name? What kind of life? Day by day, Ethan continued his treatment at the hospital. The headaches came frequently, sometimes so intense that he couldn't even remember his own name. His memories remained hazy, as if a beautiful painting was being erased bit by bit. Everything in his mind turned into scattered fragments. He knew he had a life before this, but he couldn't connect to any part of it. Far away, hundreds of miles from where Ethan lay, Buddy was still wandering the dusty roads, sniffing every familiar trace, searching for his owner. Day after day, he traveled farther, never stopping, never giving up. He had no hope other than to find Ethan, the only friend he had ever loved. Buddy never spoke, but in his hurried steps there was a love and loyalty so profound that words could never fully capture it. In Buddy's eyes, nothing mattered more than being reunited with Ethan, but Ethan had forgotten him. When Ethan woke up after the accident, he remembered nothing of his past. Everything before him was like a dense fog, blurred, unreachable. He didn't know who he was, where he had come from, or what kind of life he had lived before waking up in that cold hospital room. His memories were shattered, impossible to piece together into a complete picture. He only had a vague feeling that he had lost something incredibly important. At first, Ethan thought it was just temporary shock, but over time, he realized that his memory was completely gone. The people around him, the nurses and doctors, couldn't help him recover what he had lost. The only thing he could do was accept his reality and start over. While the doctors and hospital staff tried their best to assist him, a charitable organization in Chicago stepped in to help. This well-known organization specialized in supporting accident victims and those facing difficult circumstances. They took Ethan to a small house, where he would be cared for until he fully recovered. In the early days, Ethan felt incredibly lost and lonely. He didn't remember anyone, and he had no family or friends. Each morning, he could only see strangers, new faces, but none of them knew who he was. However, the kindness and care of the people in the charity organization helped him feel that he was not abandoned. Throughout the first few months, Ethan began to learn how to integrate into his new life. He learned how to use a computer, participated in life skills classes, and gradually realized that, although he had no memory of his past, there was one thing inside him that remained intact: the desire to rise above his circumstances and take control of his life. One day, while sitting in a small cafe in the city center, Ethan met a man named Michael, a successful investor and founder of a large tech company. Michael had heard about Ethan's story through a friend in the charity organization and decided to help him. Michael saw potential in Ethan that others might have overlooked. Despite lacking degrees or experience, Ethan had an incredible ability to learn quickly and a work ethic that was admirable. After a few months working with Michael, Ethan gradually discovered his passion for technology. He began to participate in a new software development project that Michael's company was working on. Although he faced many challenges at first due to his lack of foundational knowledge, Ethan's determination and intelligence allowed him to overcome every obstacle. He learned from those around him, from books, and from online courses, gradually perfecting his skills. Not long after, Ethan made significant contributions to the company. He helped the company improve several processes, offered creative solutions, and, most notably, was the leader in developing a new mobile application that brought great benefits to their customers. Thanks to these successes, Ethan was appointed as the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, of a division within the company. Although success came quickly to him, Ethan never forgot the feeling of being lost that he had once experienced. He knew that there was a reason for him to become stronger, even though he couldn't remember his past. Especially, he always felt an emptiness in his heart, a longing he couldn't explain. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had lost something incredibly important, but he didn't know what it was. Every night, when standing before the window of his office on the top floor of the company building, looking out at the shimmering lights of the Chicago cityscape, Ethan wondered if someone was searching for him. Was there someone out there thinking of him, just as he always remembered something vague in his heart? Throughout his time working, Ethan gradually built strong relationships with his colleagues, friends, and business partners. He became a successful entrepreneur, admired by all, but in his heart, there was still a void he couldn't fill. Whenever he had free time, he would search for information about his past, but all his efforts brought no answers. One time, while attending a technology conference, Ethan overheard a woman sharing a story about the unconditional love and loyalty of a dog. The story suddenly made Ethan's heart ache with a powerful feeling. A feeling of familiarity, as if this story was somehow related to him. He couldn't explain why, but the longing came flooding back, as if someone was waiting for him, and it was then that Ethan realized that no matter how successful he became, no matter how much he achieved in life, there was still a part of him that hadn't been found, a part that might have been forgotten long ago. And he decided that, no matter how difficult it was, he would search for the memories he had lost, find what he had lost. Ethan knew this journey of searching wouldn't be easy, but he couldn't give up. He had learned how to rise from failures, and this time, he would not let loss take over his life. He would find his memories, even if they had been buried by time. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the program, we would love for you to leave a comment and share your thoughts in the comments section. If you find the program meaningful, please don't hesitate to share it to support the channel and spread its value to those around you. We wish you all a truly meaningful time. Buddy still remembers clearly, on the day of the accident, when it stood by the roadside, watching the large truck pass by, and then its owner could no longer stand up. The look of fear in Ethan's eyes, the gaze full of confusion as he no longer had the strength to call its name. Buddy didn't understand, it only knew that a part of it had been lost. But that couldn't stop it from continuing to search. On that day, when Ethan was taken to the hospital, Buddy couldn't follow. Fed a few pieces of old bread by some locals, it wandered alone, traveling from the countryside to the city. Its heart was filled with an indescribable sense of unease, as if a part of it had gotten lost. Every day, Buddy ran around the familiar fields where it and Ethan used to roam, smelling the damp earth, the wind blowing through the wild grasses. But Ethan's figure was nowhere to be found. Each time it neared the house, it would stop to check, but the house was empty, and no one was there to greet it. Day after day, Buddy never stopped searching. Although its small legs were tired and its stomach empty, it never gave up. Every morning, it would run along the main road, looking around for any sign of Ethan. Every time it saw a car similar to the one Ethan used to drive, its heart would race with hope, wishing it would be reunited with its beloved friend. But Buddy's journey was not easy at all. Along the busy streets and crowded neighborhoods, Buddy often faced cruel treatment from people. Pedestrians, when they saw a stray dog, not only ignored it but even chased it away. Some even threw stones at it. Once, Buddy was chased away by an elderly man with a stick. "Go away, don't stay here," he shouted. Buddy could only retreat in fear, but it never gave up. It knew it had to keep going, because if it didn't, it might never find Ethan. One day, as Buddy wandered through a small street in the city, it felt exhausted. Its tiny legs were sore, and its thin body couldn't endure the scorching heat of the summer. The sounds of traffic, the hurried people, all seemed so foreign to it. Buddy lowered its head, its eyes half closed, feeling like it was sinking into despair, but then, a familiar scent wafted by. The scent of Ethan. The scent it had missed for the past 3 years. Buddy raised its head, suddenly standing up, despite the weariness. It took a deep breath and ran quickly forward, following the trail that its nose was leading it to. Buddy's journey became increasingly difficult. While it was raining heavily, Buddy found a temporary shelter in an abandoned warehouse, where it curled up to escape the pouring rain. Its body was soaked, but in its heart, Buddy still had a strong belief that it would find Ethan. When the rain stopped, it continued its journey, passing through crowded streets and areas it had never been to. Once, Buddy encountered another dog, a stray dog living in the old streets. The dog looked at Buddy with a suspicious gaze, then lunged at it, growling and trying to push Buddy away. A small fight ensued, but in the end, Buddy managed to escape without serious injury. However, the stray dog caused Buddy to lose a lot of time recovering before it could continue its journey. With each passing day, Buddy got closer to where Ethan was living. It didn't know exactly where Ethan was, but part of it felt that it was getting closer to its goal. Every time it heard the sound of a car horn or hurried footsteps on the street, Buddy's heart would leap with hope, thinking that maybe it had found its friend at last. One autumn afternoon, when the sun gently filtered through the golden leaves, Buddy had reached the area near downtown. It had been so long since it had left the countryside. Now it was walking through streets it had never imagined before. Every time it stopped to sniff the smells coming from shops and parks, Buddy felt like it was getting closer to Ethan. One evening, as nightfall gradually enveloped the city, Buddy stopped in front of a tall building, where yellow lights flickered from the windows. This was where Ethan lived, but Buddy didn't know that. It paused for a moment, looking up at the sky and feeling a strange sensation, as if something familiar from the past was vaguely coming back. Buddy sat down under a large tree in front of the building, unaware that reunion was very close. A magical feeling in the air signaled that its persistence was about to be rewarded. Ethan had it all. A successful CEO with fame everywhere, a company worth millions of dollars, large contracts with international partners, luxurious parties, trips to famous cities around the world. His life lacked nothing. But in the quiet moments of late nights, when he sat alone in his large room, looking out the window at the dim city lights, he felt something strange. Despite having everything, he still felt the absence of something important. A feeling of emptiness crept into his mind, as if part of himself had been lost, but he couldn't figure out what it was. He tried to find comfort in work, in meetings, in quiet nights in luxurious spaces. But it all seemed like a shell, hiding the emptiness within, memories of the past, fragmented pieces that couldn't be put together, sometimes surfaced during the quiet of late nights. He remembered a small, simple house, surrounded by vast cornfields, where peaceful mornings passed with the scent of earth and the smell of crops. He remembered a dirt road, where he and someone had once walked together. But he couldn't quite remember who that person was. The feeling was familiar yet too vague, as if a part of himself had been forgotten during the busy years. One day, as he was stepping out of the office to head home, something strange happened. Ethan stopped at a busy street corner in New York, where the traffic was as hectic as ever. But today, his eyes casually glanced at a dog standing by the side of the road. The dog looked like a stray, its fur dirty and its eyes sad, as if it had endured many months of wandering. But what struck Ethan as strange was its eyes. They seemed like a forgotten part of his memory, something so familiar yet not immediately recognizable. The dog stared at him, its eyes not the lifeless gaze of a wild animal, but one full of understanding and anticipation. There was something profoundly different about it, an inexplicable connection between him and the dog that Ethan couldn't quite explain. He felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from a strange sensation he couldn't put into words. That feeling, that familiarity, pulled him closer to the dog. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving its gaze. It felt like he had seen those eyes before, but he couldn't remember where. It was as though the dog was looking at him with gratitude, with an unspoken expectation, as if it were waiting for him to realize something important. The dog slowly approached him, not with fear, but with patience, as if it were waiting for something from him. Ethan didn't know why, but he felt like he needed to do something. He wanted to pet it, but hesitated, unsure whether it was a good idea to approach a stray dog. Yet the dog's eyes kept urging him, as if it wanted him to understand something deeper. This dog, it feels so familiar. But why can't I remember? Ethan wondered, a gnawing feeling rising in his chest. He stood still for a moment, feeling a gentle breeze brush against him, easing the summer heat. But still, he couldn't keep the dog with him. He knew he couldn't do anything other than let it continue its journey. The dog wasn't his pet, and he couldn't hold it back. The dog turned its head and walked away, but its eyes never left Ethan. As it walked further away, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of loss, like something precious had slipped through his fingers. He didn't understand why, but his heart felt heavy. In the days that followed, the image of that dog haunted Ethan's mind. Every time he looked into his reflection in the mirror, it felt as though someone was standing behind him, looking at him with eyes full of hope and love. He began to feel more and more the emptiness within him, that something had been left behind. The hazy memories started to become clearer. Mornings on the cornfields, time spent sitting by a warm campfire on a cold night. Suddenly all these memories rushed back like waves crashing on the shore. one night, as he sat in his lavish apartment, the dim city lights shining through the window, he looked out into the vast emptiness. He wondered, did I once live another life? Was that dog part of a lost memory of mine? The uncertainty about his past grew even clearer, as if a picture was gradually coming into focus in his mind, though many details were still missing. But one thing was certain, he knew there was a powerful connection between him and that dog, a connection that words could never describe. The dog wasn't just an animal. It was a part of his past, a companion who had been with him through difficult times, a memory he had forgotten, but now it had returned, to lead him back to himself. Many weeks had passed since Ethan met the stray dog. He couldn't stop thinking about its eyes full of strangeness and familiarity, as if a part of himself was calling to him from a distant place. Every time he stepped outside, a feeling of unease would rise within him, as if the dog was somewhere nearby, searching for him, and would appear right in front of him. He couldn't explain the feeling, but the urge in his heart grew stronger with each passing day. One autumn morning, as the sunlight began to shine through the golden leaves outside the window, Ethan decided to take a walk. He was tired of the unanswered questions in his mind, tired of the feeling of being lost and unable to find himself amidst the luxury and emptiness. He wanted to go outside, to seek peace in the busy streets, where the sounds of the city could momentarily make him forget the wandering thoughts. Ethan stepped out the door, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. New York City was as it always was, with hurried crowds, bustling cars, and the lively sounds of a Monday morning. But today, there was something different. A feeling he couldn't explain. He stopped at a street corner, where the doors of flower shops and small cozy cafes cast a warm light. And then, he saw it. The dog. This dog was not the stray he had met before, but there was something very familiar about it. The golden-haired dog stood on the roadside, looking at him with bright, fearless eyes. That gaze made Ethan's heart tighten. That's right, this was the dog. Buddy. Without needing to think much, without asking why, Ethan immediately recognized it. It was Buddy, his loyal companion, the animal that had been with him through difficult times, the one that hadn't given up, even when he had lost his memory of it. The dog stood there, eyes still locked on him, as if it had been waiting for him all these years. Ethan walked closer, his hands trembling, his mouth dry. He sat down, gazing at the dog with tear-filled eyes, and then, he called its name, Buddy. With a slight wag of its tail, Buddy approached, sniffing Ethan's hand as if to make sure it was really his old friend. Then, in a miraculous moment, Buddy jumped up, embracing Ethan tightly, like a child finding its mother. Ethan's heart raced, feeling as if all the memories, all the emotions that had been buried for so long, suddenly flooded back. He hugged Buddy tightly, unwilling to let go, fearing that if he did, the dog would be lost again. Here you are, Buddy. Here you are. The feeling overwhelmed Ethan. All the long years without memories, without family, suddenly rushed back in a moment. Love, loyalty, and memories of the simple days by the cornfields, the difficult journeys they had shared, all came alive in his heart. He felt as if Buddy had always been by his side, despite the miles between them, despite the time that had passed. That bond had never been lost. Buddy shook his head, eyes shining, as if smiling at Ethan. Ethan gently petted Buddy's head, tears rolling down his cheeks. Not out of sadness, but from a feeling of overwhelming happiness. He had found a part of himself that he hadn't been able to touch for so long. Buddy was everything he had lost, and now, he had found it again. I missed you. I really missed you, Buddy. Buddy wagged his tail, as if understanding everything. Ethan stood up, took Buddy's leash, and they walked together down the streets. Amidst the rushing crowds, amidst the bustling sounds of the city, there was a moment of stillness that only Ethan and Buddy understood. They didn't need to say anything more because the love and loyalty between them had already spoken for everything. From that day on, Ethan's life changed. He no longer felt empty, no longer felt loss, because he had found the most important thing in his life, true friendship and unconditional love. Together, they faced new challenges, but no matter where they went, no matter what they did, the love between Ethan and Buddy would forever be an unbreakable bond. One morning, as they walked together on a quiet street, Ethan stopped and looked at Buddy, chuckling softly, "You found me, Buddy. And now I will never let you go." Buddy looked at him, eyes shining like stars, then grinned. The difficult years were over, but they knew they would always have each other, never to part. One May morning, as the gentle winds began to blow through the fields, Ethan stood by his office window, looking out over the bustling city he had lived in for many years. Success, wealth, luxury cars, and towering buildings, all these things could bring him temporary satisfaction, but inside, he still felt empty, as if a part of himself had been lost forever. Ethan had lived in grandeur and career success for far too long. He had everything, except for the peace of mind he truly needed. What he needed now was not another big deal or a new title, but to recover the forgotten memories, to find a part of the lost past. Finally, the decision to return to his hometown, where everything began, became clear. Ethan needed to go back to his roots, where he had spent difficult yet meaningful years alongside Buddy. Those tough times had taught him about love, loyalty, and the invisible strength of human values. With Buddy by his side, he drove his luxurious sports car out of the city. The two of them left behind the busy streets of New York, heading toward the rural plains of Nebraska, where their memories still lingered in every inch of land, every wooden house, and the endless cornfields. Ethan's trip home wasn't just a pilgrimage to the past, it was also a return to find himself. He was no longer the famous, wealthy CEO. He was a young man who had once lived in poverty, who had cherished simple dreams alongside his loyal dog, Buddy. And in that moment, he clearly realized that those simple moments were the most valuable things in life. The road to his hometown was long and quiet. The familiar hills and fields gradually came into view, rekindling in him beautiful memories. But it was here, too, that the pain of the past didn't easily fade. Old friends, former neighbors might not recognize him anymore, as he had changed so much, both in appearance and character. Yet, with every step, he faced not only the past but also what he had left behind, loved ones, memories, and even himself. Arriving at the old house where he had lived with his parents and Buddy, he felt a special sensation, as if the house was welcoming him, even though everything had changed. The scent of earth, the smell of old wood, and the soft summer breeze reminded him of so many memories. He sat down on the porch, feeling as though time had turned back, and he was returning to his childhood days, those peaceful days when only Buddy and he walked through life together. Buddy quietly lay by his feet, his eyes bright as they once were, as if the dog understood everything Ethan was feeling. Ethan reached out to pat Buddy's head, a simple gesture but one filled with so many emotions. He realized that no matter how much the world changed, no matter who he became, Buddy would always be the friend who never changed, always there, loyal, and loving him unconditionally. The next day, he met with old friends, people who had known him when he was a poor farm boy. They looked at him with surprise. And then, old stories were told again. They remembered the times they worked together in the fields, the cold winter nights when Buddy was always by his side. They also didn't forget the months when he had gone missing after the accident. Ethan felt relieved when facing these people. There was no longer any divide between him and them. They were all honest people, loving one another, and the beautiful memories of the past still lived on in their hearts. He understood that no matter how successful he became, only sincere affection and unconditional love were the most valuable things. The story ends with the image of Ethan and Buddy standing together, in the gentle sunset of their homeland. They didn't need to say anything more, everything was clear in their eyes. The challenges, the heartbreak, and the losses of the past no longer mattered. What mattered was that they had found each other again, and Buddy's love and loyalty remained the most precious thing in Ethan's life. Ethan and Buddy's footsteps on the dirt road, in the twilight glow, gradually faded into the vast space, symbolizing enduring love, values that time could not erase, and a journey of return full of meaning. In the end, when everything had settled down, Ethan and Buddy found each other again, not just as two beings, but as two hearts that had suffered losses and risen from brokenness. Love and loyalty had overcome all, bringing them back together. This story proves that no matter how life changes, true love will always be the guiding light. Please leave your thoughts and emotions about this touching journey in the comments, as every story shared brings hope and inspiration to us all. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share and subscribe to the channel to not miss other inspiring stories. Thank you for following and supporting.